Hello there, everyone. I'm Jess Gelter from Arts Alive, and this is our presentation of the Arts Access Study. I'm going to share my screen. So, the Arts Access Project. This was a project done in collaboration with Antioch University, and it emerged out of ideas back in 2019. We were thinking about who has access to the arts, why is it beneficial, and how does it help build our community? So we started doing some reading and research, and we began, myself and Dr. Tomoyo Kawano, with two research questions. First was, can the arts be a tool to improve community health? And the other was, what are the barriers to accessing the arts? Can people, or do people want to, take their arts medicine? So in 2019, the US government was very excited about this idea of a loneliness pandemic hitting our country and the world. Loneliness has significant negative health implications. So the number I think that really jumps out to me on this slide is that loneliness can cause the same amount of damage to your lifespan as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yuck. And this all stems from humans have evolved as communal creatures. We live and exist primarily in community with each other. And when we are lonely or isolated, there are these primordial evolutionary triggers that happen in our body that tell us you're not safe. And so they heighten our alertness and they send new hormones coursing through our body, and our hearts beat faster. And it's like putting our bodies in a stressful situation when we are alone or lonely or isolated. So there are health implications, and studies have shown quite literally that there are significant impacts on heart and other health for folks that are lonely. So that was 2019. And this was the direction we began to think about how to shape our study. Looking at our region, Monadnock the Healthy Monadnock Alliance did a study in 2019 as well, looking at some of the health outcomes from their Healthy Monadnock 2020 initiative. And they found that there were adults experiencing frequent mental health distress, about 12% of their surveyed population. And then youth experiencing sadness or hopelessness was all the way up at 34%. And so, there is significant mental health distress in our region, mental health issues. We're curious, how does loneliness play a role in this? And can the arts help? The world, since we asked that question in 2019, lots of stuff has happened that has divided folks, that has isolated folks, that has had significant impacts on loneliness across our country, from politics to social justice movements to, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns, isolations, and social distancing and other health measures that have been taken to prevent the spread of the virus. So in 2020, we began planning to launch our study, and the study launched in the winter of January 2021. It launched with a full independent review board process so that we made sure we were sticking to best practices ethically with our study participants. We had both a survey and a focus group, or a series of focus groups. So the community survey was accessible to anybody with internet access. And we marketed it with promoted posts on social media, with this big, beautiful sign that you can see in front of the Keene post office, with ads in the newspaper. And then we reached out to partner organizations, both in health, social service, education, and the arts, to help us disseminate this study and get a good participation turnout. To incentivize participation, we also included a drawing for a $100 gas or grocery gift card. So the outcome of all of that was we got almost 400 survey participants. And then for our focus groups, they were structured as conversations that opened with an arts activity to remind folks what arts activity participation felt like. And then it was a series of questions after that. And all of our focus group participants were paid for their time or for their travel or for the hassle of coming out and either being in person or spending the time on Zoom with us. So that is how we did our study. So I want to just share with you these numbers, which were some of the most delightful that came out of the study. So we asked a couple of questions about community and connecting. 97% of survey respondents agreed that a connected community fosters well-being, and 90% agreed that community events are an effective means to connect people. We also asked the last question on a scale of 1 to 10. So anyone who answered over a 5, 80% of our survey respondents said they would like to be more connected to community here in the Monadnock region. So folks understand that events and community events connect people, that connection fosters well-being of the community, and that they want to be more connected. So that's a great way to launch into the rest of this, I think. Just a little bit about who ended up participating in our survey. We did collect demographic information for the survey, but not for the focus groups. So for our survey of almost 400 folks, we had a slightly older age group than the median age range in our region. We had a slightly smaller family size, and I think that has to do with the older participants not having kids as part of their family groups. Household income was on par with the median income of the region. So the median income of the folks that we surveyed on par with the median of the region, which means there were folks on the lower end of the spectrum, there were folks on the higher end of the spectrum, and it really reflected the economic realities of everyday folks that are here in the Monadnock region. So as far as race, we found that survey participants were slightly more diverse than the general population in our region, but not significantly skewed in any way. What was significantly skewed was the educational attainment of the participants in the study, in the survey. So we asked them, high school or college or master's degree or beyond, or less than high school. And in the region, there's about a 31% of folks have attained that high school graduation and nothing more. In our survey, only 6.8% of people attained that high school diploma and nothing more. The rest had 4-year degrees or advanced degrees, which is very different than the region's general population. So that may have skewed some of our answers as well, but it's just sort of an FYI. So let's dig into some of the data. One of the first questions we asked was, we asked folks to rank their physical health, mental health, loneliness frequency, and loneliness intensity. It was on a scale of 1 to 10. So, 1 for physical and mental health is poor, 10 is I'm totally fine. Loneliness, frequency, and intensity. 1 is, I'm hardly ever lonely. 10 is I'm so lonely all the time and it's overbearing. Um, it was really interesting to see how the data plotted. These lines represent the average of how folks were reporting. So this tracks loneliness frequency, right? So as people became more frequently lonely, this is what happened to their physical health and their mental health. This to us was a really great indicator that the national data applies to our local culture, that when national studies say that loneliness is related to physical and mental health and poorer health outcomes, it is also true in our region. And our study respondents, you can see the lines. As people get more lonely, they report feeling less mentally and physically healthy. So what else did we ask? So we weren't just interested if loneliness had a connection with health. We were interested in if folks were connecting or utilizing the arts as a tool to manage their loneliness. So we came right out and asked that question: do you use the arts to manage your loneliness? So we had about 63% of folks say, yeah, I use arts to manage loneliness. The other 38% said no. But as you'll notice in that little pie chart there, the no is 2 different colors. And that's for this reason. We also asked them if they felt less lonely after their last artistic activity. And that orange chunk represents people that said, no, I don't use arts to manage loneliness. But yes, I did feel less lonely after my last artistic activity. So it's really interesting to see even people who participated in their last artistic activity alone felt less lonely after doing that artistic activity. 87% felt less lonely afterwards. Of course, when you included other people in those activities, the amount that they felt less lonely increased. So we asked them to rank on a scale their loneliness after participating in that activity, how their loneliness was decreased. So the higher these numbers go, the less lonely they felt. And this is for people who participated alone. This is for people who participated with one other person. This is for people who participated with 2 or 3 other people. And this is for people that participated with 4 other people. So as we add people to their last activity, their feelings of that activity impacting their loneliness in a positive way increased. So what activities are people using to manage their loneliness? So we asked specifically in the last 3 months, what is it? What are you using to manage your loneliness? And this, of course, was during that winter of 2020, 2021, where we were pre-wide distribution of vaccines, and we were essentially in a pretty quiet, almost lockdown sort of phase here in the region. Not literally lockdown, but pretty close to it. So what were people doing? They were making visual art and or crafts. And they were making music and they were writing. I think those were the 3 biggest categories of what folks were doing to manage their loneliness. We also asked, well, were there other activities that you were using to manage loneliness before the pandemic? So other activities people were using before the pandemic, you can see that attending performing arts events was on the list. Of course, during the pandemic, folks weren't able to do that. You can see that participatory dance was significant on this list. Of course, during the pandemic, that was less likely to happen. Exercise, education, there's a lot of different activities folks named performing. Lots of different ways folks were engaging in the arts to manage loneliness. And I think it's really striking that so many people are engaging in making visual art and crafts to manage their loneliness and making music. So we also asked about what community events they miss, what activities they'd like to get back to engaging in. And this little heart is a word cloud, which creates larger words for those that are more frequently mentioned and smaller words for those that are less frequently mentioned. So we took all the words from the open-ended responses in the survey and we put them into this word cloud. And of course, we've got art, music, concerts, classes, theater, festivals, outdoor, dancing, shows, lots of great words in there. So these are the community-based arts events that were mentioned a lot: contra dancing, singing in choir, open studio events, festivals, going to see live music. There were also outdoor community hikes and things like that, and educational events like lectures and workshops that were mentioned frequently. It was interesting to note that folks were really focused on the activities and not so much the presenting organizations or spaces. So very few folks mentioned, yes, we would like to get back to doing community events at the Colonial Theater, or we would like to participate in activities at the Peterborough Players. They were more specifically talking about community-based events, things that were volunteer organized or volunteer oriented, things that did not require an arts institution space, things that did not require arts institution staff. So that was interesting and of note that the infrequency of mentions of regional arts institutions and their community event as community events. So moving on to barriers in accessing events. So we asked this in a few different ways. First was a multiple choice question. Here you have the results of that multiple choice question on the survey. It was interesting to us that timing was such a significant barrier. And we phrased it a little bit differently on the survey. We said timing as related to life events. And folks in the focus groups and the open-ended portion mentioned things like, making dinner, getting home from work, childcare, bedtime, Jeopardy, lots of things that they are committed to taking care of and prioritize over attending arts events. Or prioritize over attending arts events at those specific times. Cost was another barrier, which we weren't surprised at. We were assuming that might make the top 3 list. Cost is a barrier. And about half of all the survey respondents selected that as a barrier. Disinterest, also about a third of folks said disinterest was a barrier. Weather, and obviously we're in New England, snow is a barrier. But also it was interesting, someone from one of the focus groups mentioned that she would rather not go to an indoor arts event on a beautiful spring or summer day because we have so few of them in New England. Then social anxiety, that's one I want to unpack a little bit in this presentation in the next few slides. Health considerations, of course, Because this was done during the COVID pandemic, health considerations are certainly an important barrier to mention. Though as the pandemic and community transmission rates ease down, it may not be as much of a barrier. There's fear of exclusion, which we'll break down a little bit later as well. Some of these numbers are influenced by the demographics of who's participating in the survey. So we'll break down some of these along some demographic lines, just so you can see them in a new light. And then it was really interesting. 1 in 10, a little over 1 in 10 folks mentioned childcare as a barrier to accessing the arts. Then, of course, transportation. 1 in 20 mentioned physical accessibility. And then, of course, internet access, since folks were both getting information for arts events online, as well as, at that time, attending arts events online. So we also asked for open-ended responses to this question. I thought it was really interesting that not only was timing one of the barriers that folks could check off in the multiple choice area, but it ended up being one that a bunch of people decided they needed to emphasize again in their open-ended responses. Timing, overlap with other events, overlap with other life commitments. So that was really interesting. Feeling I'm accepted sort of fit along the themes of fear of exclusion and social anxiety. So again, we'll unpack that a little bit later. Also important to mention awareness of the event. A handful of folks in the survey mentioned that they didn't know events were happening. And in the focus groups, we definitely heard that folks were not aware of events happening in time to plan for and prepare for attending them. So yeah, I just also like to point out 9 people said nothing was a barrier. So let's just take a moment to talk about accessibility. And accessibility can be visible, like this person pictured in the wheelchair, or can be invisible. And so you never know if you should make any assumptions about someone and their ability to access a program. So we'll talk about parking accessibility, bathrooms, seating. Is there enough space for me? Sound. Do you have assistive listening devices? Is there going to be an ASL interpreter? Is the online program going to be closed captioned? And vision, do you have large print programs? Are there other vision accommodations that you can make? So folks in the focus groups mentioned a few things to help out with this. First was providing helpful signage around the space. Also providing information in advance in marketing and on the website that they can access in advance of the event to know how to be prepared. Also, knowing that there's someone to talk to for help with accessibility if they need it. When they arrive at the event, who can they go to, who can they see, or who can they call up in advance of the event just to check in and make sure that there's going to be things that will help them be comfortable. Social anxiety, here we go. Have you ever been to a chamber music concert and clapped at the wrong time? Well, that is what social anxiety looks like. Being worried about being judged by others, being embarrassed or humiliated, accidentally offending someone, or being the center of attention unintentionally. And we separated it out by age group and saw that folks that are under 30, 63% of them, 2 out of 3 folks under 30 name social anxiety as a barrier to participating in the arts and arts events. that was a really startling number for us as researchers. And I think it's really important as arts organizations and arts presenters look at growing their next generation of participants, audiences, funders. What does this number mean, and what are the implications of this? And how can you create a welcoming space for those folks under 30? Well, we talked about social anxiety with the focus groups. One of the topics that came up was the ability to go with or bring friends. Friends, there were a lot of comments made about bringing friends. Some were positive, some were negative. So first was someone mentioned that her friends were unsure about trying out new experiences. And even as a buddy, were unwilling to or uncomfortable with attending an arts event or paying to attend an arts event. So she suggested perhaps a BOGO, buy one, get one, would help her bring her friends who were nervous about going or trying something new or spending money on something new. The next comment was, I don't have friends that like to go out and do the same kind of events as me. You can have friends, but maybe they're not interested in the same arts activities you are. So what do? They mentioned a solution might be to build friendships at those arts events. Saying, I wish I was better at being outgoing and making friends at events. Well, how can you as an arts presenter facilitate that? How can you provide opportunities for conversation or prompts for conversation that help people connect with each other, meet each other? So this last bit, who is afraid of exclusion? So talking about how we help facilitate connections between folks is, I think, really important, especially as we look at these numbers. So I got to tell you, our survey responses skewed older, and older survey responses, older folks were not afraid of exclusion. But 20% of folks that make less than the average per capita income were afraid of being excluded. A quarter of folks that are under 30 years old were afraid of being excluded. And 1 in 3 people who do not identify as white were afraid of being excluded when they attended a community arts event. So, creating welcoming spaces. So for this section, I'm just gonna have my fellow researcher, Sierra Tunquist, present this. This is actually one of the videos that were recorded that lives on our YouTube channel and our website, where we share the data and talk a little bit about it. So this video is 1 of 6. I'm only going to play a portion of it, but the first 3 videos that we have address arts, health, and loneliness. And then the next 3 videos address some potential data and solutions for arts organizations to make arts more accessible. So I'm going to start this. I'm just going to skip ahead to the right time.
In our study, we made an assumption that the space of a community event is a key element in making individuals feel both comfortable and connected with one another. Through open-ended responses, participants suggested that a community space can be welcoming in the following ways. Participants preferred open, clean, well-designed spaces for gathering. To do this, organizations can ensure a space has accessibility accommodations for those with disabilities, set aside a quiet space to escape crowds and loud conversations, and provide physical comfort with comfortable seating, well-monitored climate control, and clean and accessible bathroom facilities. Survey respondents describe the importance of an organization's policies, structures, people, and norms. Welcoming and non-judgmental staff and artists is one way an organization can do this. Utilizing friendly and informed greeters is a frequent recommendation. Additionally, respondents praised spaces where a diverse audience is accommodated. Diverse needs include socioeconomics, age, disability, and cultural racial diversity. Survey respondents suggested 4 ways to support diversity: reduce or eliminate costs, welcome and accommodate families and children, address comfort of disabled, senior, and elder audience members, and present artists from diverse backgrounds. 2 other ways an organization can create a more welcoming and inclusive environment is through making food or snacks and educational material available. The culture and behavior of other attendees was also noted for its importance in creating a welcoming space. Survey respondents asked for ways to make it easier to bring friends to an event, connect and acknowledge each other's shared interests, and wanted organizations to create a welcoming atmosphere by offering accommodation to a diverse audience base. Survey participants mentioned a desire to be engaged by their hosts in the following 3 ways: providing participants prompts, time, space, or other means of facilitating connection and conversation with each other during a program was 1. Offering a hands-on element that is easy, approachable, and engaging was another. Creating spaces for passive participation for introverts was the 3rd.
Part of these findings inform us about customer service. The other part is about being responsive to a diverse set of needs when creating an event, festival, or exhibit. It should be noted that respondents who did not come from diverse backgrounds were also asking for a more diverse artist lineup and other accommodations.
So there it is. That's a little taste of the videos that we made from the data that we collected. So creating welcoming spaces. The next couple slides are about questions that we have for you as arts organizations and arts presenters, arts community leaders, that might help you think a little bit more deeply about how you might approach coming up with some solutions to these issues. So first, opening those gates. So we talked a little bit about gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is the practice of deciding who does and does not deserve access to an arts program. For example, deciding that kids aren't welcome. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And how does that influence your accessibility? Next question is, how can you provide information in your marketing that doesn't cut out those who don't have an arts background? If you promote an event or a concert and you list accolades of your artist that only folks in the in crowd would know what they mean, that's going to be a problem. The general layperson won't know what that means or if that's even impressive. I just recall a time I went to an arts exhibit and the program information and the artist bios and the description of the work was all in this very elevated academic language. And because I haven't studied contemporary art or art techniques or art history, I was really unfamiliar with a lot of the terms that were being referenced. And I felt like I really couldn't understand the work and that it really wasn't for me. So on the other side of that is, how can you inclusively elevate the community's arts education? How can you teach them about terms? What is an adagio? When is it appropriate to clap? What does the end of a movement of chamber music versus the end of a piece look like? So how can you elevate your community's arts education? And then how can you make informed decisions about your approach to that by engaging non-experts in the community? If you want to engage more kids, get a kid on your board or an advisory committee to help you understand how to approach that community education. Again, are your audience culture expectations in line with the culture of the communities you'd like to engage? So I have this story about working on a project in downtown Boston, where we presented really beautiful, well-produced Shakespearean plays, and the audiences were high schoolers from all around Boston. And a lot of the actors were very experienced Shakespeareans, but they were used to performing for polite audiences in beautiful historic venues, or venues that were not full of high schoolers. Let me tell you, the experience was really different for them, because the high schoolers that we were bringing in, some of them had never seen a play before. Some of them had attended different community arts events where the rules of engagement were very different. And so their culture they were bringing to it was one where they could shout at the actors and tell them what to do, and as if it was a sporting event or something. No, don't go in that door. Stop. Don't do that. And the actors were really surprised at the culture of the audiences that they were performing for, that it was very much different than what they were used to performing for. But the presenting organization and the director really sort of smoothed over those relationships and made sure that the performers felt comfortable doing this, because that is the audience that we wanted to reach. And so we didn't want to shame or disparage how they were interacting with the art form. And it was quite enlivening, and they were very engaged. You could tell in the stories, because they were responding to it vocally, which is not what some of the performers were used to, but I think they grew to appreciate it over the course of the season. So, other considerations. Again, thinking about what the space is like, and we went over that in the video. Will participants be engaged passively or actively, and what is expected of them? I'm going to share another story because I think it's relevant. So the Peterborough Townhouse has contra dances every now and then, and I think it's really wonderful that the space provides not just the dance floor and that area to be involved in the dancing, to get asked to dance, to get your toes stepped on, just to be in the jumble of human excitement and activity. But also there's the balcony, and you can go upstairs and be in the balcony and watch all the beautiful dancing happening and listen to the music and be a passive participant. You're still engaged in the event. You're just doing it a little differently than everybody else. And that's okay. And it was really nice to have that difference and those two separate spaces. So the next question, what do participants need to bring or know in advance? And how do you share that info? How can they be ready and be prepared for the experience they're going to have? Will people's diverse needs be accommodated? And where can they get information or ask questions about that? And I think a really great resource for that is the National Endowment for the Arts Accessibility Checklist, which has a wonderful list of things. You just go write down, mark off, make sure you've attended to all of them, or as many as you can. It's a great place to start. And then last question, will participants feel that people like them belong at your event? And so I do have another story for this one. And it's about, there was an arts organization that was doing some renovations and published some really great architectural drawings of what their new vision was going to be. And it was really exciting. And I noticed that the pretend people in the architectural drawings, they were all light-skinned, able-bodied folks. That sort of struck me. What struck me more was the very next hour, day, really shortly after that first image had been posted, they reposted it with different people in it. They posted it with people with lots of different skin colors, as well as lots of different physical abilities. So it was really exciting to see that they realized, oh, this doesn't represent the people that we want to welcome here. We want to welcome all people here. So let's visualize that even in our architectural drawings. And as little a thing as it might seem, it actually does have a big impact when you can see yourself in the marketing, in the photographs, in the architectural drawings that an organization is presenting, because you're like, oh, I could be there. I can visualize myself there. Thank you for that image. So, not even in advance, but also in person, will participants feel people like them belong at your event. So it's not just in the advanced marketing, but it's also how do you make a welcoming space and culture, from those greeters to accessibility issues, all of that. All right. So again, I just want to bring your attention to the videos. They're great to watch. They're great to share. They're great resources. The first series is a series of 3. It introduces the study, talks a little bit about loneliness and community health, and then how arts might be a great intervention for improving community health. And then the second set of 3 is about arts accessibility in the Monadnock region. So it reviews some of the arts and loneliness data, but particularly digs into the barriers and creating welcoming spaces so that arts presenters and arts organizations can have the information they need and can sort of think about the questions that they might need to address around arts access. So that's my presentation. I'm going to stop the recording now, and thank you all so much for being here and being with us.